Alright everybody, this is Walker. This is We Play Games. I'm going to be doing a sort of like a kick the tires tutorial. What are we looking at when we're looking at the country? What is the country's position in the world in 1836 and what happens to it throughout the course of this game. So we started with Portugal, and the one thing that I regret that I did not really cover at all for Portugal, it does appear as though, yes, she is an intelligentsia reformer reliably, so Queen Maria is phenomenal. She's a great starting ruler, and a reasonable size army to boot, right? 20 plus 15, the 15 pack of flotillas means that you can probably not fight Vietnam. That's too much. But Oman, and then probably any other large population centers that you can find that no one will resist you. Try to be friends with the United States, etc. But Portugal starts as an independent country, and so has a lot more options than today's episode. And in today's episode, we're talking about Cuba. Cuba is a great, very fun starting country. It's got slavery, so there's some interesting push and pull there. It's got natural harbors. You've got a lot of things that you need to do. So first, I want to pin where Cuba is. Cuba, this is a puppet of Spain. So that means that we are a lot closer to Spain than a dominion is. So like the EIC is a dominion of the UK. That means they cannot annex them in one action, in one diplo move. But Spain could annex us. So until you're ready to declare independence from Spain, which does not need to be when you're stronger than them, it just needs to be when you're strong enough to call in friends. And Spain also starts with slavery. You start with slavery. You might be able to bribe somebody to help you by offering to ban slavery. It's very possible that you can get there, but right now we're not going to be able to demand independence, and nor necessarily do we want to, because the first thing that you can do as one of these little colonies thing, you're probably not going to need a military like at all, right? What are we doing with barracks? We're going to build them later. Naval base, all this is really doing is giving us power projection, which isn't even necessarily worth it, because look how small our budget is. We want to be able to build things, because if you build things, then your economy grows, and if you don't build things, then it doesn't. And that's the long and short of it. And so we want to build stuff, and we want to build some specific things. So let's go to a macro lens on Cuba. Cuba, very important for Spain. This was one of their very first colonies. I think Santo Domingo was literal first, but one of the very first colonies of the crown colonies of Spain was Cuba. Cuba is the launching pad for the invasion of the Aztec Empire. It's also a really important point in terms of the administration and distribution of goods. It's got a really nice natural port, natural harbors. That's kind of a good thing for you, because you're going to need to do some trading. So historically in the 19th century, Cuba, there was an effort by the United States to purchase Cuba multiple times from Spain, because they wanted another slave state. And it was a slave state because at that point in time, Cuba was largely being used for cash crop agriculture. Cash crop agriculture is where you're like, oh, it's going to be so inexpensive for me to build a little bananas. Oh, Eileen just got back, but we can finish this. We can do a quick talk about what we're building. Historically, that we would have seen cash crops built up, but I'm here to tell you, don't do that. Do not build up cash crops. Cash crops are the devil. They're gonna strengthen your landowners, and they're gonna prevent you from passing good laws, and you don't want to do that. Passing good laws is always good, including charity hospitals. So we're going to reform our government, and we are going to include this little alliance. We're expanding the Conservative Party to be full, and that's going to allow us to pass charity hospitals, and that's going to let us spend some of this bureaucracy. So remember, we're one state, and it's one incorporated state. So our pops are gonna cost us a lot more of our bureaucracy than the states, or probably even the institutions. But we have the bureaucracy to spend. We might as well spend it. It's gonna pay itself back, because it's gonna make our pops very usefully built up. We can build a construction sector. So each construction sector is going to cost us 75 wood and 25 fabric, right? Wood's pretty cheap and fabric's balanced. So if we want to go really crazy on normal construction sectors, then we're going to probably need to keep an eye on fabric and wood costs. But we could build probably one or two. Let's build one at a time and just see how much the cost increases by. We're also going to go towards mechanical tools. So to finish pinning Cuba in like real history, there was this effort to buy it until the Spanish-American War. In 1898, there was a war between Spain and the United States. Cuba had a little revolution going on in the time. There had been actually long resistance from Cuba versus Spain, like almost 3 decades of civil war and unrest. Same in the Philippines. Like they'd been trying to overthrow the Spanish for quite some time, and then the United States decided that it was time for it to be able to play imperial power, and intervened, and that's where you get Theodore Roosevelt and all that stuff. And but you the entire time as Cuba historically were just basically a slave state that did cash cropping, and then eventually slavery ended, but you were still just like a wage slavery cash cropping place. And that's bad because look at these productivities. That's limited. Unless there's a giant demand for the cash crop that you're working on. If it's not an industrial cash crop or a food cash crop like bananas, it's not really as profitable as you might think it is. You need to have rich pops in your market in order to get the most out of this, and Spain is not the United Kingdom. So rather than doing what you did historically, then my recommendation is lean into what you have. Leaning out of agriculture is also useful because if you'll see here, in order to switch over to farming, you need fertilizer. And in order to do fertilizer, you need sulfur. And guess how much sulfur you have in the Spanish Empire? None. There's not a lot of sulfur to be had around here. So just like, yes, Cuba, historically, it's very fertile agricultural land. Don't mess with it. It's a trap. Use this. You have the holy trinity of early game industrialization. You have logging camps, coal mines, and iron mines. That means that you can build a pretty good heavy industry. You can probably build a steel mill. Don't go too crazy, right? You are 900,000 population, so you don't need 2 of a lot of different things. Maybe you need 2 of the tooling workshop. Maybe you need 2 construction sectors, but your cash is going to be pretty strapped the entire time. So my recommendation is probably don't push it. 1 construction is probably fine, but we'll do 1 construction sector, 1 tooling workshop, 2 iron mines. As a bigger state, obviously, with a bigger, easier access to cash, you can build more than that. Don't be afraid, right? If I had done the numbers for Portugal, I could tell you exactly how much we need to build there, but in reality, you can probably build 3 or 4. It's a fairly hefty GDP. It's a lot bigger than ours, and you can probably find easier access to wood and iron than we can because we're a subject, and that just means that we have fewer options when it comes to trade. So given how much cash we have right now and how much of that we have, I think, and the fact that we are part of a fun little thing, we're going to go ahead and boost this, and we're going to do road maintenance. Just like always do road maintenance. It's always good. It lets you build things. Building things is good. And now we have enough authority, and we're doing charity. I'm not going to play like 100% because we're just trying to get this done, but we've got some authority and we might as well get some money in, because then we could build probably maybe build a 2nd construction sector actually. And I like that. If you can have 2 construction sectors building simultaneously, you can build things pretty fast. And we do have cash right now. So what can we tax? We could tax grain, but that would make our authority expenditures so high that we would slow down on passing charity hospitals. That's not worth it. Let's pass tax services. That's usually good. Green is good when you desperately need the money and you don't have good laws to pass. That's when taxing green is good, because it lets you work with your authority. Good. Well, I'm glad that we've increased taxes, because now we can cover this stuff and get this stupid thing done. The industrialists are marginalized. All right, well, they can be as angry as they want. I don't care. Again, this is one of these things. It should probably just start with this stuff pinned, but it doesn't, so we adjust. That's something they can patch. But now we've increased the chance of passing charity hospitals a lot, and that's gonna give us a little bit more of what to do with our bureaucracy. I don't think a third construction sector makes sense here. I think the second one might not even be necessary, because it prevents us from cheaply switching over to iron frame buildings, which is what we would like to do. That's going to cost 100 iron though, so that's going to mean that we're going to need probably 3 or 4 iron mines before it makes any sense at all, and that's just to cover the switch. So we may end up in a position where we regret building the second construction sector, but the first is always worth it, because it gets you a construction efficiency bonus, plus it lets you switch over to iron frame building, which further does that and gives you a lot more construction. So if you want to build a lot, you want to build at least 1 construction sector immediately and then start building things. 2 maybe, depends. If we really are unsure about it, we can just tax something else. We could tax green. How we could tax green, that's fine. Taxing green, whatever. We don't need authority. Charity is going to be on everybody's lips. They're going to want to pass it kind of no matter what, right? Yeah, they're going to want to pass it no matter what. We don't need to do any work to keep our pops not overthrowing our government. Looks at our number of radicals. It's fine. Radicals are cool, right? Radicals are fun. And now we have 73,000 peasants to work with still. That's fine. That lathe is pretty good. And now we have mechanical tools, so we will want to get a steel mill online, so that way we can switch over to steel tools. Because if we can switch over to steel tools, then we have a local demand for steel, which means that we can support our local steel industry, support your local steel industry. So go with that. But once you have a local steel industry and tools that can demand it locally, then you've created like a little bit of a feedback loop of industrialization. Don't go too hard, because you don't have a big budget. The bigger your budget is, the faster your economy will grow, and the faster you can grow versus the debt. So like in Chang, you have the opportunity to build a lot of stuff and very, very, very quickly pay down debt. And importantly, it's hard to go bankrupt because your GDP is so big. But that's not true with Cuba, and you need to be careful about the speed of your construction. So I think 1 or 2 construction sectors, tooling workshops, 1, and then some iron mines, some coal mines, and then a steel mill gets you a nice industrial base. And then you're working on mechanical tools. Maybe you get railways. And then from there, you should probably be able to get your standard of living really, really high and start attracting migrants. And that's where having access to steel locally is going to make your life easier, because then you can also build motor industries, and then you can also build railways. And again, this is a small country, so I would start these as cottage industries as like level 1s and then expand them. But you're not expanding on multiple states. It's just the same one, so you're not violating the rule of economy of scale. I think that's the basic framework of what you want to do as Cuba. If you could pass some of these other laws, but the main thing that you really want to try to get online is going to be charity hospitals. Depending on, again, what the starting ideologies of your leaders are, you might have very, very, very different rules, different laws that make sense to pass. Like maybe dedicated police force makes sense to pass, actually. Well, sure it does, because we're going to have plenty of standard of living decreases. We're going to tax people a lot. So we might have wanted to pass dedicated police force before. No, I like hospitals, but as soon as you get hospitals, you probably want to go into dedicated, because hospitals makes your church happy, which gets you birth rate, and that is going to be critical for you as you industrialize, because you're going to run out of peasants You're probably also going to need a university eventually, but get your money fixed first because universities are really expensive. I think that's about it. If you have any other questions about what you should do with Cuba, I think that your fastest path to success is just accept the fact that your conservative party apparently is the government at the beginning, and use the Catholic Church to help you start to wear down the strength of the landowners by passing laws that increase their own clout and avoid things that increase the clout of the landowners. And if you can abolish abolish slavery, that also will almost certainly do you some benefit long term, because A, it's going to radically depower the landowners, and B, slaves are really inefficient. I can show you right here, but basically let's look at the clout. So we have, because of slaves, 33%. It's not the biggest there. Where's a place with just like an insane number of slaves? South Carolina has an insane number of slaves. The clout from this insane number of slaves is going to largely be going to planters, because the wealth that's coming off of the buildings that they're working on is not being equitably distributed the same way it would in a free state, right? Because there's instead of there being laborers working here, there are slaves, and the slave owners do not feed them particularly well. That means that the cost's going to go down. That means the wealth from those buildings is going to go largely to the landowners. You're going to have strong landowners as long as you have slavery. So end slavery whenever you can, because then once the landowners are weak, you can do lots of cool stuff. Because look how bad those laws are. It's gonna be a tricky start for Cuba, but I do think that this tiny little steel loop here is exactly what you need to do. You've got the holy trinity of construction. Use it. All right, that's Walker.